today. We have a couple of guests that will be joining us to inform us about what's happening in their states. And I just want to remind everyone, we are recording the meeting. So the meeting is recorded, a public meeting, and that will happen. So, Laura, do you think we need introductions or do you think we can get right to it? I'm not sure. We do have some guests, so.
It's up to you. I know Mark Duffy from Massachusetts is on and ready to go. So we could start there unless you want to have, I know we have a couple of guests from other agencies here.
Sure. Sure. Well, why don't we get right to it? And on the way, if we need to get into introductions, we'll do it. Well, Mr. Duffy, thank you for joining us from Massachusetts, a dairy farmer down that way. And I guess what our charge here at the Milk Commission and in our last meeting, we wanted to look about either some tax programs that are happening in our neighboring states and what it means to you as a farmer and what it means to you as a state. So I think if you just want to open up and explain a little bit about what you do and what's going on in Massachusetts that may be relevant to what's happening in Vermont. So good morning and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it very much. Yes, I am a Massachusetts dairy farmer. Been farming in Massachusetts for 39 years. Previous to that was in New Hampshire. And actually on my mother's side is from Vermont. I have two brothers living in Vermont, and on my father's side from New York. So I cover a number of bases. But Laura, you can put up my first slide.
Okay, then just let me know when you're ready to advance.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I am here to talk about the Dairy Farmer Tax Credit program. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what started out is in 2007, we really realized that we had to do something to help the dairy industry. And so task force was convened. I served on it. Two other dairy farmers, Dave Shepard, Richard Witcher, were on it. Very powerful group of legislators. The administration really got committed. Certainly, we have had a very strong support from the administration all through this. And so a number of recommendations came out of that and changes were made on various issues. But really, we're going to talk about the Dairy Farmer Tax Credit, which was recommended and ultimately passed because of this. The first thing I want to start out is originally when we talked about a tax credit, I said, hey, you know, I've been a dairy farmer for quite a long time. I don't normally have a tax problem. And so lo and behold, I found out that this was a refundable tax credit, which means that if you owe taxes to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it is taken out of your payment. If you do not owe taxes to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or there is funds in addition to what you owe, it is actually a check. And what it turns out is Massachusetts has a lot of tax credits. We have movie tax credits. We have life science tax credits. We have a pretty strong program in tax credits so that it really fits what is happening to other industries. That's why many businesses conduct business in Massachusetts. That's why many movies are made in Massachusetts because of the tax credit they receive. Next slide. Okay, so it is designed as a safety net. There's a formula in it. What we did is we looked at the various costs in Massachusetts. We had all sorts of individuals come in front of the dairy task force with ideas of what would help the dairy industry. And so many of them, as we went through it, is it really going to help us? Is it really going to make a difference? You know, certainly many insurance programs were offered, and we said, are we going to pay more in premiums than we're going to receive in payments? And yes, that was usually the answer. And so ultimately what we ended up here is we developed a trigger mechanism that we actually used to use an economist who worked for the UMass Amherst. to help us calculate that number. And then it would trigger payments in months where the costs uh, were higher. And with time, as the years have passed since 2007, is most months are currently triggering. And our feeling at that time is we didn't want a handout. We wanted a true program that was based on the needs. And there were a number of changes over the years. One is USDA stopped providing some of the information that we used. Okay. And so that's why we had to spend some time and had different mechanisms to help us trigger. Now the Department of Ag is actually calculating the trigger price. Okay. So to each farmer, it's based on their individual production, but it's of course divided by the total annual production in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts by dairy farmers. The Department of Ag does administer the program, and I would have to say does a fantastic job. Next slide. So currently, we are limited to $8 million per year in tax credits. So this number has varied. It was 4, then became 6, then became 8. And so that's actually in the tax code of Massachusetts. This is not subject to appropriation. So if you move to Massachusetts and get a Massachusetts income tax form, you will have a line on it for the dairy tax credit, even though it, of course, only applies to people who produce milk in Massachusetts. Okay. And so that does provide enormous amount of protection for, gee whiz, there's no money this year and you won't get your $8 million or what you're entitled to as a percentage of that $8 million. The next thing I would say is that how it's growing. When it originally started, and I want to give credit to a lot of people who were involved in developing it. And certainly the farmers I spoke about, and now Darrell Williams is definitely very engaged, and Dave Hansen when he can. And but also the legislators, the administration, co-op. Catherine's really helpful. Bob Wellington was helpful. Doug Domeno did a great job. So an enormous amount of work goes into maintaining the support for the dairy industry. And even though the money is, as I say, not subject to appropriation, we did create an association, Massachusetts Association of Dairy Farmers. We asked farmers to pay $5 a cow to help us hire a lobbyist, to help us hire an executive director, to have 2 meetings a year, to be very active. We do work with other commodities in Massachusetts very strongly. Okay, we are the only one that has a tax credit like this in agriculture, but there are certainly other programs for other farmers. So the last point is very important is when we were developing the tax credit, there was a lot of discussion about, well, how would this be paid and how would people qualify? And so what actually happens in Massachusetts is everybody producing milk, each farm producing milk that has a registration, whether you milk 1 cow or 2 cows or 800 cows, is you are entitled to your share based on your per hundredweight production. There's also some mechanisms to make sure that you are following some other responsibilities that you have as a farmer. Okay. But essentially every farm in Massachusetts that is registered to produce milk is entitled to the same amount per hundredweight as every other farm. We did look at like paying on butterfat or paying on protein, or some other people thought certain groups of farmers ought to get paid more or paid less, and ultimately decided that per hundredweight basis, whether, as I say, you milk 1 cow or 800 cows, is how we pay. Next slide. So this is just how it's calculated. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but records are verified. The department really works to make sure that every farmer that's entitled to it in Massachusetts does apply for it. Obviously, we have a lot less farmers in Massachusetts than when you do in Vermont. But the fact of the matter is we have a very diversified agriculture. And so this is what works for the dairy farmers. And certainly our friends in other industries have different programs, nothing quite like this. This gives an example showing an individual farmer $30,000. Obviously, what we're looking at right now is a maximum of $8 million paid out in a year. We have around 100 farmers. It's about $80,000 of a farm, but obviously bigger farms more and smaller farms less. So the thing I will say a couple things about it is that how we got this is to all be on the same page and everybody agree that we were going to do it this way. And we were not going to spend our time complaining about how certain people farmed. And we were not going to complain about how many cows somebody milked or didn't milk or how they chose to farm. It was really to help out everybody. And I am pretty proud of the fact that even today is we do have people just milking a couple cows who are very supportive of what's going on here. And these numbers are published. You can actually see how much different farmers got paid. And we are proud of the fact that, we are supporting family farms here. Next slide. So this just talks, we still lose farms, obviously. I think we all realize that. If there's no next generation, no matter what the finances are, you still lose farms, okay? In this, 97% of participating farms said it was critical. I guess I have not met the farmer who's in that 3% or the three farmers in that 3%, because every farmer I talk to says this is critical. And it's actually quite interesting is even the suppliers talk about it, the fact that injecting that kind of money makes it so they want to do business in Massachusetts. They want to have customers and they want to support our industry, even though we don't have the size of some other states. Okay. There has been a lot of oversight over the years. So obviously since 2008, the legislature's very well aware, the governor's very well aware. So we have had two different increases. We started out at $4 million a year, and then we went to $6 million a year when some very powerful legislators advocated on behalf of us. I can remember one of them saying, "You understand, I could not get elected dog catcher. We're counting on the dairy farmer vote. We are doing this because this is the right thing to do." And then when our current governor got elected, is she asked what she could do to help us out and if she could add money to our tax credit. And so Maura Healy increased it by the last $2 million to the $8 million per year. And that was actually based, I've been told, on the fact that she grew up in New Hampshire. Her father was active in town and one of his best friends was a farmer, and she understood farming and she wanted to help us out. And that continues to this day. I want to make sure I spend time here and make sure that everybody understands what is enormously critical here is we have to all be on the same page and not get mired in disagreements or lack of respect or understanding of what the commitment. So this is a commitment by all the different administrations since 2008. It's a commitment by the legislature. We are very active at Ag Day at the State House. the tree lighting ceremony. We wear cow ties. We, in the past, have given gifts out to legislators, making sure they understood. And they're gifts that acknowledge us, like a milk bottle or something like that, and making sure that we thank people for what's going on. And so that is an enormous amount of work done. But from my perspective, you look at it and you say, if you feel you deserve $8 million a year or close to $8 million a year, you better prove that you deserve it. And so we have done studies on economic viability using milk promotion funds. We have done educational efforts and definitely reach out to make sure that people understand how critical this is to us as an industry. And that continues in something that can never stop. We did not get this without an enormous amount of hard work by a lot of people, including the vast majority of dairy farmers in Massachusetts. So in 2004, the $8 million was just about $4.50 per hundredweight of all the milk produced in Massachusetts. And as I say, the amazing thing here is because we can count on it, and it's been happening since 2008. The lenders are counting on it. The infrastructure is counting on it. We as farmers can count on it, and it has dramatically changed dairy farming in Massachusetts. And certainly we have a lot of younger generation farmers who want to continue. I do believe we have the highest percentage of robotic farms of any state in the United States of America. I farm with 2 robots. They're putting in 2 right now, just north of me here. And now that's not the highest total number of robots because of the size number of farms we have, but as a percentage of farms, it's really one of the ways that you can measure the difference it makes if you can count on payments when the price of milk declines. And as I said, most of the time right now, given the cost of producing milk and given our challenges, is we expect for most months to trigger the payment. So, and my next slide, I do believe, is questions. Next slide, Lauren. So I guess first of all, I start out in when we had the dairy task force, we had individuals from all different states come and talk to us about what they did in their state. And I want to acknowledge is we have something in Massachusetts because Maine had something. And the Connecticut guys are trying to get something because Maine has something and we have something. And I certainly hope that Vermont can get something because hopefully Connecticut has something and is working on more. And this is really an effort of how do you work together, okay? And how do you make it so that all the things that dairy farmers bring to the table, open space, quality of life, local food production, the environmental impacts, all those things. And then you tie in the strengths of your Department of Ag and your administration and your legislators. And ultimately, as I was told, is the consumers in Massachusetts, the taxpayers. And so when we first started and Deval Patrick was our governor, we went around to town hall meetings with him. And we have spent these years making sure that the taxpayers of Massachusetts and the legislators and the administration all understand what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do. And it involves all sorts of things like making sure that we don't show up at the State House with just a bunch of old guys with gray hair. Okay. And making sure that that we talk about the positive impact and what we're trying to do and how important the environment is to us. And we've been challenged, as most farmers have, on things like sustainability. And certainly when you can bring somebody to the table who says, well, I'm the 13th generation, then we can have a real good discussion about sustainability. Okay. In my particular case is what I like to say is, I farm the land that overlooks Old North Bridge, where the battle for our independence was fought. And one of the reasons why that battle was fought is the farmers were very dissatisfied with what was going on with their oversight and choose to fight. Whereas we really have chosen to work with people and try to make a difference. So thank you, and I'll entertain. You can ask me any question about anything. I'm pretty much an open book, and look forward to having a discussion.
Well, thank you. Just a clarifying question. So you don't have to go back to the legislature every year. This is, unless you want to change the appropriation. So it sounds like you don't have to justify it every year. Is that correct?
Correct. It is not subject to appropriation. It would have to be repealed. Okay. So when we originally started, we looked for a revenue source. That was the goal. But it was no new taxes. And we looked at, and we had some very powerful legislators, Senate President, Chair of Ways and Means. So, let's go take somebody else's money. Well, that didn't go over very well. And so that ultimately, we ended up where we are, not subject to appropriation. So it is in the tax code. We do not get reauthorized.
I open up to any questions from I want to just acknowledge we have the tax commissioner for the state of Vermont is with us. They'll show license with us. And we also have the Deputy Secretary of Commerce with us today too. So I don't know if you guys.
No, this is very informative. I'm gonna probably take a lot of notes and then meet up with Anson because I wanna understand the program in Massachusetts, how it lines up to, or if we were to put it on parallel with Vermont, what do the metrics look like in terms of size of farms, 100 weight that we flow, how would that get distributed? And I like the idea of it not being an appropriation. If you're going to do it, put it in tax code. It's probably going to be an odd thing for the tax commissioners.
Mark,
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I thought it was an investment tax credit, but it's not. It's just a tax credit, which is different from what I was looking forward to hearing. And it sounds actually simpler than an investment tax credit on the production side.
Correct. You do not have to make expenses. You don't have to buy things. It can pay for family living. It can pay for your education of your kids, whatever your farm needs and you choose to. We do have other strong programs helping out farmers in Massachusetts. And I will say is, and I've certainly heard in the past, well, this works for Massachusetts, not many dairy farms, a lot of taxpayers. But of course, we started out looking at Maine, okay, which has an enormous amount of agriculture, more milk production than we do. Certainly not a lot of wealthy taxpayers, okay. Would I just hear how many billions they just collected in Massachusetts? But we have to make sure that we are very respectful because we have a very big fisheries. We have a very enormous cranberry industry. We have a lot of buy locals. We have a lot of vegetables. So we have a very diversified agriculture. And so that is something we have always tried to stress. And as I said, we hire the same lobbyists. We work together. We're very supportive of other commodities. So even though our dairy industry is much smaller, excuse me, even though our dairy industry is much smaller, the fact of the matter is our agriculture is enormously diversified. So,
Thank you.
Catherine, I saw your hand go up. Do you have a comment, Catherine, from Agmark/Cabot Economist? I don't know if you have a question or.
Yes, thanks, Anson and Mark. Thanks for those comments. I just wanted to respond to, I'm sorry I missed your name, but to the gentleman who spoke up about, running some numbers. I just wanted to offer my assistance if that's of interest. I think this group will probably talk about, and Mark alluded to, Connecticut farmers having going through a similar exercise right now. And so I did assist them with drafting, just playing around with some of those metrics and what a Massachusetts program in Connecticut would need to look like. So I'd be happy to offer assistance to the state of Vermont in that regard, if of interest.
Tate Brooks?
Yeah, Anson, Mark, again, thank you for your information. Obviously, I think you have some valuable resources to share with other states and jurisdictions out there, and maybe take Catherine up on her offer to some extent. It'd be interesting to hear and learn, what you saw prior to the program in various key performance, indicator areas. So, did you see a decline of farms? Did you see any sort of changes as far as milk supply goes? Did you see any changes in regards to ag land as far as being in use? Just trying to understand the impact on those various areas.
yeah, and we actually had Manamit do a dairy farm impact survey as part of establishing that for us. That was done in 2010. And so we do have that information, and I will say is because it's capped in dollars, okay, as farmers do go out of business, and as I said, some do, if there's no next generation, certainly, is then that money is available for other farmers that are growing, basically keeping the same amount of money at work. And so I would say that has been quite beneficial. We are very limited in ag land in the state. And so our biggest farms are, as far as I know, milking less than 1,000 cows. But having said that, the outlook, the next generation's interest in being involved in agriculture, the connections between young farmers and the connections between existing farmers. And just like at our 2 annual meetings a year, our summer picnic and our winter meeting are extremely well attended. And so we have dramatically changed the face, but certainly Catherine can help you out with some of those details on the actual numbers. But from a perception of what we're trying to do here is we used to go and complain about how many farms had gone out of business. And in fact, we had a map showing how many farms had gone out of business in Massachusetts in X number of years. We do not take that map anymore because we're focused on all the good things that are happening and the positive attitude and all the positives. And I can tell you, certainly in my case of my town and my business and stuff, there is a big support for local production agriculture. And obviously is what we do here is try to get money to absolutely everybody.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have a question? I think you're on mute, Kevin.
Yes, classic, right? Good morning, Kevin Corey, Phoenix Feeds. We've participated, and I think the feed dealers need to be involved in this. We've participated in Maine. We've recently participated in Connecticut, providing information maybe similar to Catherine's on the milk side on what the increased feed costs are for these states. Maine particular, we also see it in Connecticut based on federal regulations and trucking rules in Connecticut and Maine being as far east as you can get from any sources of grain. So it's something that we have participated in. I think it's a good exercise to be undertaken. And speaking to Vermont, I think it's something that we need to be really aware of moving ahead. We're getting less and less desire for truckers to come to the state of Vermont and move feed because they can source loads that are better in some cases. And I think we will see an impact over time with less and less trucks that want to come into the state, moving feed into our market to service our dairies.
Senator O'Brien.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I just had a couple questions to give us some context. How many dairy farms in Mass?
Less than 100. It kind of depends on how you count.
Yeah,
Whether LLCs are, but less than 100.
sure. I wondered, does this apply to organic, conventional, and goat dairies?
Not goat, but it certainly does. So it's dairy. It's
Okay.
not goat. It's not goat dairies. Okay. It's cows dairies. It applies to organic, same payment schedule.
Yeah.
And conventional and producer dealers. And if you got a license to sell milk in Massachusetts, it applies to you.
Okay. And last thing was, I noticed in one of your slides that the milk had to be sold in Massachusetts.
No, it doesn't actually have to be sold in Massachusetts.
Oh.
It has to be produced. It has to be produced in Massachusetts.
Yeah, because when we had a dairy task force here, and when we looked at Maine and their tiered program, not a lot of milk is leaving Maine, and I'm sure not a lot of milk is leaving Massachusetts, but Vermont's got, every day I drive north to Montpelier, I just see DFA trucks heading south, so a lot of milk here leaves the state.
Yeah, and currently a lot of Maine milk is moving to Massachusetts. So there has been some pushback by saying, "Oh, you're collecting it on the milk that I produce out of state." We're not actually collecting it on the milk produced. This is a program of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts wanting to have a dairy industry in Massachusetts, and the taxpayers of Massachusetts wanting to find a way to have dairy farmers in the Commonwealth.
Mark, has it always been triggered? Has there always been a payment since the program started?
There's over the course of a year. So what actually happens is so like last year, okay, it was triggered for 12 months. It has not always been triggered for 12 months, okay? And then it is the following year when we actually receive the payments, okay? That they total up the total production for the state. And usually about around people start getting checks in the April kind of time frame, okay? So there has always been a payment for the previous year, but not always for 12 months. And
That would be based on because the cost of production or the price of milk paid to the farmer was high enough, so it didn't trigger the program.
correct. And that, we were approached by saying, okay, what if we just give you X number of dollars and then will you go away kind of thing? And we said, no, we want this to be justified by saying, this is the economics we're facing. Do you want us to farm in this state? And then we want to have a formula. We want to have a formula, a reasonable formula. And so we don't want this to be seen as a handout.
Mark, Alan Reeds, I serve on the Milk Commission and the Consumers Chair. I wanted to just put an exclamation mark on a couple of things you said and then ask a quick question. The perpetual outreach is so important, and that really, I think, benefits your ongoing success to say, prove we deserve it. Continue to tell the story, as well as the aspect of connecting between farms, young and old. That is so critical in the success of small state ag. Successful, but are there naysayers? So what's a typical naysayer likely to bring up as an argument? And then the other thing would be is, if you were starting from scratch, what might you change today? Obviously, the program has evolved, but is there something else that you would like to see tweaked?
Okay. I would have to say, as far as naysayers, not in so much in agriculture. You know, there are certainly people in the world who are against animal agriculture. So we're not going to keep everybody happy on that point. But from a standpoint of defending this, obviously most of our legislators are urban legislators, okay? And we have to go to them and explain what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it here. And to me is that's why open space and quality of life and local food and everything are all part of the discussion. Okay. And yes, you know, I would have to say we kind of babysit this. This is our number one issue, our association. We get involved in other things, but the reality is we want financial viability for farms in Massachusetts, or we will have no farms, or certainly no dairy farms.
And
So
what might you change from today or tweak?
okay, well, you know, we've, and it's important, I want to stress that again, is it's we, you know, a lot of people working on this. You know, the Connecticut guys started big, want to start big. Connecticut farmers think big. That's great. Okay. We started by learning how to walk and proving ourselves, and as you say, continuing to show up. So I'll give you an example. I've used this sometimes before. So we went to a fundraiser for our governor down at A.D. Makepeace, biggest cranberry grower in North America. And on the way down, the two of us who were going to be there called on the phone, said, "You're going to wear your cow tie or not?" And I said, "We'd be the only person wearing a tie if we wore our cow tie. I'm not going to wear my cow tie." So we go in, the governor comes in the back door, starts working the room, comes up to us and says, "Where are your cow ties?" Okay. So we have that kind of relationship. Now I'm sure she doesn't know my actual name. Okay. But those are the kind of things, enormous kudos for a very, very strong, as you have, secretary, or in our case, commissioner of ag, enormously strong, enormously dedicated. Okay. And so if you were to ask me what we would do differently, we do never want to appear to be greedy. But when you start in the dollar is a dollar something, I'm a personal believer that a dollar a hundredweight changes the economics of dairy farming. So when you get to $4.50 a hundredweight, you can dramatically change the economics of dairy farming. When we were a dollar something a hundredweight, we had a lot of farmers asking the question, is there a way to get more? And we were very careful never to want to appear greedy, always to want to make sure that we acknowledged that the hard work and the sacrifices that were being made, so that we could have money to pay our bills.
Thank you.
Jade?
Thanks.
Yeah, Mark, just I guess a follow-up on the questions as far as changes and doing things, any additional hindsight. So my understanding when this was first rolled out, the refundable tax credit was at 90%. I think it's at 100% now. And so just trying to get some additional insight in regards to interactions, conversations, information you were able to share to go from originally at 90% up to 100%. And I say that and flag that because in other sectors, we see refundable tax credits, lower down at 50% as an example, not at the full 100% value. So just trying to get a sense how that conversation progressed on that front.
Yeah. So in my discussions in the legislature, when our tax credit is compared to what life science got, or the fact that a lot of the movie tax credit, the movies made in Massachusetts, but they sell the tax credit to somebody else because they don't actually do that much business in Massachusetts. They just come here to film. And also, I don't want to pick on specific companies compared to what some other people typically, okay, the response is we really respect that your tax credit is a reasonable number given our budget and given what we're trying to do here and what you represent to this state. So I would say that has been my experience in dealing with legislators and in dealing with the administration is we very much respect the job that is done and the challenges that they have. And we want to make sure that we do not ask for more than we feel that we deserve. So there's certainly, if you start totaling up the years, okay, dairy farming is a long-term process. And if you can count on year after year, just like in Maine and now in Massachusetts, that the money's going to come and the farmers are going to spend it. We're not going to go to Las Vegas gambling. You're going to see it as you drive around and watch and talk to the people who we do business with. Is really that's what we built here, and we're pretty proud. And I do not typically have, I'm more than welcome to talk to urban legislators about what we're doing. Okay. But we have very, very strong supporters in the legislature.
Senator O'Brien.
Mark, just first a comment. Vermont's got what I think a $9 billion annual budget approximately, and I think Mass is something like 46 to 50 maybe billion. So when you look at that tax base and then you look at our, I bet we ship probably 10 times as much milk to Massachusetts. So you can see our challenge there.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, again, for context, are there tax credits or some sort of subsidies for, say, fisheries, lobstering, or cranberries, like the sort of big players in Mass Ag?
There are different programs, like the cranberry industry went in for a program to help them renovate cranberry bogs and put in higher yielding varieties. And Catherine actually worked on that program when she worked for our Department of Ag. And so different industries. So originally other commodities showed up and said, hey, can we get with the dairy guys? But the reality is it really depends on your commodity and what you're looking for. So I would have to say, and I think this is probably true in every New England state, that different commodities need different things to help them. And for us, because of the federal order price does not reflect our costs of producing, as you know, in Vermont, okay, in these terrible, terrible swings. And the fact of the matter is what do you do in order to survive? The reality is the dairy tax credit has been key to us. Whereas for other commodities, they certainly have support. And, but nothing, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody has exactly what we have.
Well, any other questions? Anyone else online? Great. Well, Mark, we really appreciate your insight. Very valuable. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. And we're just at the beginning of this journey here, so we're going to continue to take testimony, and we just don't know where it's going to lead us. We hope it leads us to a better economic model for all our dairy farmers. So
Thank you.
appreciate that. We appreciate it, and you're more than welcome to stay on, but I know you've probably got a lot of work to do on the farming connection as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Good. So any reflections on that at all? Anyone? You
No, I
learned
think-
something, you learned something there.
I think as the rep said, it was kind of where I was going, is, how do you align a program like they're operating in the state of Massachusetts with a very small amount of dairy farmers? And relative hundredweight, how do you align that with the state like Vermont to take a real good look at what it could be? Because I think you could come up with. Sorry, Secretary.
It's all right.
I
I didn't notice there wasn't any cream in that, but it's all right.
Yeah, I do think you can come up with a program, but at the end of the day, it isn't me, doesn't move the needle. I think you could take a little bit of money and sprinkle it across from an organic producer to someplace, and then you look at Monument or Vermont or some of these other farms and you say, smokes, that's a big industry, and how would you ever align something like that if you then will as a small state?
I mean, this is probably more, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, this is probably more for the admin Massachusetts Department of Ag, like, do they have any sort of dashboard, right, in regards to those key performance indicators to actually measure, to see the type of impact? I think that would only enhance the ability to talk about this, what sort of information they have.
Some key points that Mark said was, walk before you run on the numbers. We produce 2.25 billion pounds of milk here. We're down to 430 farms shipping milk. Where do we want to start as a state saying we really need to do something for our dairy industry as a whole? That's the first question. Is what's that number? It's at 430. Won't wait till we're 250. He said they cut the farm loft in half since 2008. Read those farms. That's pretty key. They are able to invest in technology, which the task force the governor signed 4 years ago. The study that's pretty in depth. I think Nate was involved. Son was on that. Key findings of that 18-month study was, agriculture invests in technology. So that's the back of this program. Key point he made also was the industry has to be united. It's all in. And the other thing is $1 hundredweight does make a difference on every farm. It's relative. $1 hundredweight on Bob's farm means a lot. Our farm means a lot. And some of these dairies support 8 or 10 families. Yeah, they are large. They're big business. You mentioned Vermont. Big business. How many families do they support? Because they have consolidated to make things work for them. This environment. So yeah.
Laura, any thoughts?
I can follow up with MDR to see if they've got KPIs to show impact, and that's a great next step. We did publish an economic study just recently that the Dairy Innovation Center did, and I can send that out to you all again. that shows the interstate relations and how much each state relies on other states for both export and import of both product to be processed and consumed. I think that's really interesting. I found Mark's comments around how if all of the New England states had this, the region would be much more it'd be more stabilized in a way that's going to protect consumer markets as well as farms, and thinking about rural economic health as beneficial to urban access to local food and also food security in sort of changing times. Seems like there's a lot of alignment for this program to check some boxes. I had some questions for Mark that I can follow up with him around if they've considered capping, if there is a cap to an individual farm's ability to receive payments, or if farms there, sort of similar to Vermont, are sort of geographically constrained. I think so big that they would be getting a really large proportion of the funds. So I think there's some interesting follow-ups that we can talk about for Vermont, and also the New York program being an investment tax program. A different lens on a similar approach for what a state can do.
Laura, I can just answer quickly. There are no caps based on production. There are no limitations based on how a producer chooses to produce in the market that they choose on. So it is really, very standard set of requirements. Just that license that Mark talked about.
Catherine, just a quick follow-up on that. Knowing that Mass has access to quite a bit more revenue than the state of Vermont does and has fewer farms, and we have run programs with caps based on scales, like when we did some of the COVID response programs, we had tiers based on size. Do you think that that could be a potential approach for a state like Vermont that has more farms and less money?
I think it is an approach that could be considered, but I think what the industry really needs to think about and the state needs to think about is, what are we trying to solve for? If we are trying to solve for some of those bigger picture topics that I've heard a lot of you talk about, economic stability of our dairy farms, of our dairy industry, our processors, our feed dealers, our veterinarians, all of the folks that are connected to the dairy industry and dairy production, then I think the answer is that isn't the best approach, because you're really going to miss out on a lot of those 100 weights of milk and where those economic contributions come from.
Thanks, Catherine.
Where's Brian?
I was just gonna say, as a former board member of our now defunct Vermont Film Commission, when it sort of died, when we looked at that issue that Mark was talking about, that, for the size of the state and our tax base, it did make sense to give tax credits to Paramount or Disney to shoot here, but in Mass it did, because the unions are all based there around Boston, and they do a lot more filming there. So they had to make this assessment, like it's sort of a giveaway to the movie industry, but at the same time, it creates a ton of jobs, where in Vermont, it just seems like we didn't have the tax base and it wasn't going to be a regular thing. So to get, occasional Hollywood movie to shoot here wasn't worth the sort of tax giveaway to already successful companies.
So you did on the film commission, you did a similar exercise.
Yeah. And even like, Rep. Woody Page, he had a bill, I think last year, posing the same thing, and it just never gets anywhere, because I think the numbers don't really work for them.
Well, why don't we take a 5-minute break? We're going to have guests from New York joining us at 11, and then we can do maybe some introductions when we come back. But everyone knows restrooms down the hallway. And we're back in 5 minutes or so.
Oh, how much milk is it, like 2.5 billion? What do we do?
2.2 billion, 2.25 billion in the state now. Well, we were at 2.75 billion, but it's.
Times 4.5.
Well, that's a big number.
Yeah.
That's, That's what I said, a dollar hundredweight, you know, it's money, it is meaningful, but you know, and some of it, as Mark said, it's psychological, which that state ever does not there here, and it's more than, but I can see that, it's.
Massachusetts only produces 200 million
That's-
pounds of milk.
No,
So 200.
very,
Well, we can do the math. on
Fewer
pretty fast.
than-
as
So if you get four,
price
Yeah.
goes up and down, the income. It's untouched. Yeah. That's a big part of it. So you're supporting everything.
well, I mean, could be very, he said they sounded like it's pretty rare.
Always seems a lot more common that dairy farmers.
It triggers every year, but not for every.
Lose a dollar a hundredweight.
Well,
Nobody's really
so-
paying attention and down it goes.
And that's basically this.
Inflationary
1 month
costs on the expense side. It's crept
1
in
month,
everywhere
something else.
But you have to eat it as well. Some of these.
Did you say
safety
where the
nets.
cutoff is? Is it $25?
Even in
You never-
But there's a form
the
of the
inflationary costs. That's like,
I wonder if like dairy margin coverage will even consider like the rates of mobility.
right. See, that's another thing. Some in the play.
Don't worry, I have a
January,
5-year.
February.
Oh, man.
It may have things get because the price of beef has gone up since then. It's helpful, but it's
Cost of production is gonna go up.
yes.
Your diesel bill's going up this summer.
The next delivery. CD line. Prefer that because it's owned by a company, our brothers that own the company from here, Stockbridge area. It's good, yeah. Other than sending your check to, other than sending your check to New Jersey or to Maine or somewhere. Service technicians that they respond, yeah. So you made a comment about now defunct film commission.
Film commission.
Oh, film commission, yes. I thought you said film commission. That's fine.
Yeah, it is. Just by accident, Vermont got a couple. Either films, like what life you need.
Jim Carrey one.
Yeah, the Farrelly Brothers one. Me, myself, and Irene.
Go to the sound bites.
It's. Any states, I think, that have these really high tax credits, right, they're tradable to, it's a lot of money.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay?
The number of dollars that were appropriate by the legislature the year that they gave organic dairy farmers substantial checks.
Right.
Yeah. That was.
Yeah, we have phone calls, so. It's $5.
It was a lot.
What is that?
The organic.
$5.
7 million.
What was the total appropriation from legislature?
6.9 million.
6.7.
That gives you an idea.
That was important.
It was, but you know, I don't, nobody made that rich on it. It was, I think your job was well.
The comeback is.
we need little mini fridges, so we need this place. Strategic.
Let's figure out what's.
Oh, God.
Millions in pounds is how many.
Those little bullets, I mean, they can't be any good.
Million pounds.
Just sit back out.
50 cows.
Yeah.
Not quite. Organic doesn't, we don't produce as much as.
Right.
So,
This goes around for the-
Probably about a 75 cow herd. Organic management.
Oh, he's.
How we doing, Laura?
500.
We are ready, Lauren and Sarah, on whenever you're ready, I'll just unmute.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, welcome back, everybody. Part two of our discussion about taxes and tax credits. I think we'll do introductions now that we have some new folks around. Anson Tebbets, Secretary of Ag for the state of Vermont, Chair of the Commission. And to my left, go ahead, sir.
Bill Schuldice, Commissioner of Tax.
Rob Howe, organic dairy farmer.
John O'Brien, I'm on House Ag.
Laura Ginsburg, Dairy Strategy Innovation. Thanks, Lauren and Sarah, for being on today.
Good morning, Alan Reeves. I serve in the Consumers Chair here on the Mill Commission.
Harold Horgan, dairy farmer, Fairfield, Vermont. Conventional dairy, representing DFA here on town.
I am Abby Shepherd. I'm the policy director at the Vermont Department.
I, Tate Brooks, Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Commerce.
I'm Kirsten Bourgeois, the DFA. I'm Director of Marketing and Industry Affairs and also a Mill Commission.
And Nikki, why don't you introduce yourself? Thank you, the other commissioner.
Nicole Foster. I'm a dairy farmer as well as a cheese maker representing Vermont Cheese Council on the Dairy Commission Board.
Yeah, the commissioners online. Can't see all the numbers.
No, that is it for the commissioners online.
Okay. All right. So why don't we have some of the public listening in, folks, and just a reminder, we are recording this meeting. So we're going to turn it over to talk about the New York Dairy Investment Tax Credit Program. Lauren Williams is the Director of Policy for New York Ag Markets. And we'll turn it over to Lauren, and also Sarah's joining us as well. So Lauren, go ahead.
Good
Good morning, everybody.
Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. You guys can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for inviting, New York to take part of the meeting and kind of present on the different tax credits and, opportunities we've, included in New York State to really support New York's agriculture industry. My name is Lauren Williams, and I work at the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, where we do a whole host of, similar to the Vermont Department of Ag, do a whole host of programs to support farmers across New York State. And Sarah, if you want to skip to the third slide.
Sure. Okay.
All right. And just to give everybody an overview of, agriculture in New York State, we're a big dairy and specialty crop state. We have, according to USDA, over 30,000 farms, but approximately we have 3,000 dairy farms, over 16 billion pounds of milk a year, which we saw an increase from 2024 to 2025. We have about 650,000 total dairy cows. Average herd size is about 223 cows. So still, have a wide swath of, farms from, 50 cow dairy farms all the way up to 15,000 cow dairy farms. So broad swath of folks, and I think we've seen a lot of, a really good effort to invest in our state's dairy processing and manufacturing. We're number one in yogurt, cheese, ricotta, and cream cheese. But I think some of the recent investments we've seen, from Fairlife, Great Lakes Cheese, Chobani, Agrimark, have all really propelled our dairy industry to be in a really good position. But also want to acknowledge, as we exist in the Northeast, there's this whole Northeast milk shed where not only are we getting, milk from within our states, but, being so close to the other states, we are drawing milk in from other states. And, you know, co-ops work closely across state lines. So wanted to acknowledge that. But I also wanted to acknowledge we're a big specialty crop state. You know, we're #1 in table beets, #2 in apples, and of course, #2 in maple. And, you know, fully acknowledge Vermont's place in the maple industry. But I think when we talk about that, you know, these are big, important industries, but they're also labor intensive. There's a lot of, you know, investment that goes into creating this type of ag industry. So that kind of sets up where we are now and how that led to the, you know, different tax credits, and especially the investment tax credit that we have today. Next slide, Sarah. So just wanted to frame this of, you know, background. New York created the investment tax credit, and it had always existed, but the refundability for it was created as part of the 2022 state budget. And through that, you know, some things were going on. We were seeing changes coming to the overtime for farm workers. So I think there was a discussion about how do we create some offsets to balance out that overtime threshold changing for farm workers coming down the road. And this is where we landed in terms of investment tax credit, but also other tax credits. And Sarah will go through all of those from a tax perspective. But wanted to flag of, you know, the investment tax credit went into effect in tax year 2023, and based on, you know, what we saw from the original, you know, kind of first year of investment, over $215 million went back into farmers' pockets from the investment tax credit by creating its refundability. And that, you know, total dollar amount was over $1 billion was invested in the state's farm business industry. And compared to when the tax credit was non-refundable to when it became refundable, that was over $97 million more. So an 82% increase investment, or, you know, utilization in dollars going back to farmers. And we will share the whole tax language with everybody. It was just super lengthy. And for, you know, if folks are looking up, it's 210B of New York State tax law, but we'll send it to you all so you can have a reference to see what the language looks like as well. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Carlson. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at the New York State Tax Department, and this is exactly what I do. I provide outreach and education to taxpayers across New York State, including in the farming community. So really happy to be here today and share important information that we have for tax credits for our farmers across the state. So, you know, New York State is committed to serving our farmers, and tax credits plays an important role in that support. New York State offers several refundable, highly beneficial tax credits, and these incentives are specifically designed to reduce the tax burden, offset labor costs, and assist in operations. So today I'm going to provide, you know, just a high-level overview of these tax credits, including that all-important investment tax credit for farmers. So the investment tax credit, this is a credit for placing qualified property into service. This includes, you know, machinery, buildings, and equipment that is used in the agricultural production process. It needs to be used principally by a farm in producing goods by farming and agriculture. So some examples of allowable property, you know, barns, tractors, grain storage facilities, harvesting equipment. Some things that are not allowed includes land, vehicles, you know, on-road vehicles, and farm worker housing. So this credit really encourages capital investment and job creation in New York State. And as Lauren mentioned, for eligible farmers, they can claim, you know, 20% of their qualified investment as a tax credit. Any unused credit can be claimed as a refund. This credit is effective through tax year 2027, and it is in our proposed executive budget to be extended through tax year 2033. So just a quick ITC example of where a farmer purchases, say, a $200,000 tractor in 2025. The farmer is eligible for that 20% refundable ITC of $40,000. That credit can be used to reduce their tax liability, and the refundable amount may qualify as taxable income in the following tax year. You know, we always recommend farms talk to a tax professional, but there is no cap on that refundable amount. And, you know, ITC, like all of the tax credits in New York State, they could be subject to further review by audit. We also have the Employment Investment Tax Credit, EIC. So this is a component of the ITC credit. It's available for businesses that qualified for the investment tax credit and increase their average number of employees in New York State over a multi-year period. So the amount of the EIC is the percentage of that original investment credit. So you get about 1.5 to 2.5% of that original ITC investment. Another credit that we have is a Farm Workforce Retention Credit, another refundable credit for farm employers who employed eligible farm employees, so they had to have worked at least 500 hours during the tax year. And farm employees used in the computation of this credit cannot claim any other tax credit except for the farm employer overtime credit that we'll get to in a moment. And this credit right now stands at $1,200 per employee. So again, another important refundable credit for farmers. As I mentioned, we also have the farm employer overtime credit, another refundable credit. This is available for farm employers who pay overtime wages after January 1st of 2024 based on the phase-in of an overtime threshold. So this credit equals 118% of the additional costs of the eligible overtime paid to eligible farm employees. So in 2026, the hours between 52 and 60 count towards the credit. And the credit is the overtime pay minus that base pay multiplied by the eligible hours multiplied by 118. And I have an example here on the next slide. So let's say an eligible farm employee works 59 hours in 2026, a normal rate of $15 an hour, and then they get an overtime rate of $22.50. So the calculation is that 118%, the differential between that 59 hours and that 52-hour threshold, so 7 eligible hours, and then the difference between that overtime rate and the normal hourly rate. So that's an additional $7.50 of additional overtime cost is how you would calculate that credit. And this chart just shows the eligible overtime threshold. So the threshold is dropping each year until 2032, so that at that time, any hours in excess of 40 hours will be subject to overtime. We do have an advance payment option, again, to help farmers. They can apply for an advance payment of any eligible overtime paid between January 1st and July 31st. And they just need to apply for a certificate with Ag and Markets for an advance payment by September 30th of that year. But again, just another option that we have to help support farmers, especially with the implementation of this new overtime threshold. We also have a farmer school tax credit. This is available to eligible farmers who paid eligible school district property taxes on qualified agricultural property. Really kind of dependent on each, school district and the property taxes paid. So again, it's something that you want to look for, on an individual school district level. But again, another credit that's out there. Lastly, just want to highlight sales and use tax exemptions. So New York offers exemptions to farmers and commercial horse operators. So the purchases of machinery, equipment, and supplies are exempt from sales tax if used more than 50% of the time in farm production or commercial horse boarding operations. You just need to provide a sales tax exemption certificate to the seller at the time of purchase. And then just note, for any motor fuel or highway diesel motor fuel, there is no sales tax exemption for that upfront, but farmers can apply for a refund of sales tax paid on petroleum products. And we have more information on all of our agricultural and different business incentives available on the tax department website, tax.ny.gov, by searching incentives. So this includes, again, all of our credits and incentives, development and expansion, farming and agriculture, green energy, hiring new employees, and more. And with that, see if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Lauren, any questions, folks? Representative O'Brien.
And we.
Sarah, I just wondered if there, for all the different tax programs you had here, are there dedicated revenue sources, or it's all just out of the general fund?
You mean, like, where would it come from in the budget?
Right.
That I can, get you more information about, how that works through the executive budget. That's certainly something we can research and get back to you on. Or Lauren, I don't know if you have more information on that.
Yeah, and we'll get that information to you, but I think, that's part of the discussion in all this is, working with our division of budget to kind of game plan what we might expect farmers to take advantage of, because I think that was always the discussion of making the investment tax credit refundable, was the, hesitation of how much would potentially be spent. But we can get you kind of the nitty-gritty of how, where those dollars are all coming from. And I think just to level set, like New York State's budget is, I wrote it down, is $260 to $60 billion a year. So that's, I want to say the total pot that we're working with, and then around, $378 million is what we typically say is spent on agriculture. And that's more so on, different programs or grants or different, departmental operations as well.
Do you have any programs on the processing side of dairy products?
I think
Those
that's
are
really just. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I would say our Empire State Development, which is our economic development corporation, they do a lot on, not only dairy processing, but just general manufacturing investment as well, where they offer tax credits, there's employee incentives, there's different pilot programs and payment in lieu of taxes. And always happy to connect you with our economic development folks to kind of talk about how they recruit and, invite, different dairy processing, folks who may be looking to invest in New York State. I also did want to highlight, we have what's called our, strike force, which is basically our economic development, our Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Labor, and Ag and Markets all get together to help talk about potential projects, look for shovel-ready sites, look for, potential, sites that may have been used for dairy processing in the past. How can those all be, maybe retrofitted? How can we build new? And how can we make sure that, the permitting process is followed, but also make sure any snags are elevated so we continue to, make sure projects can move along pretty easily as well. So I think there's multiple, program areas that are all making this investment to make sure that companies do want to come to New York.
On the farm side, what kind of investments have you seen? What is there any particular area that's you see more than another?
I would say in terms, and this is anecdotally, but hearing a lot of investments in terms of equipment, people are kind of, making the investment in their, crop harvesting, but also on the dairy side because, they're building barns because they know a certain percentage of that is going to come back as a refundable tax credit. So that makes the construction cost a little bit more approachable. Cows are able to, invest in as well. So folks are looking at to see how can we make those investments better on the farm side.
Any other questions?
Lauren, Bill Schuldice from Tax, State of Vermont. Can you speak to just briefly, how the property tax, school tax incentive program works? Yeah.
Right, so this is really just based on the eligible school district property taxes they paid on that qualified agricultural property. So it can't be used against tax liability in the current year and can be requested as a refund or applied as an overpayment to the next year's tax.
Yeah, and folks apply for that as part of their, tax return. So they're working with their tax preparer to apply for that. And there's certain criteria that they need to meet in order. So 2/3 of their gross income needs to come from farming as well. So we can send you all the kind of the nitty gritty on that. But as Sarah kind of outlined, that's based on an individual school district taxes that they're paying, and then they apply for it as part of their, tax return.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is I'm trying to calibrate myself for the size of the state, the size of the industry, the programs that you offer directly to the industry, and then what other incentives are being offered to support the industry through various programs. And we have something in Vermont called current use, and I think that's probably what this is. But I'm just trying to get a milk for milk comparison.
Yeah, and I would also say, there's also the ag assessment, which again is done at the local level, where the local assessor, you're applying through your local assessor for farm use, which it similar terms of, current use of the farm is set on the tax rate, and there's a certain, taxable amount based on, soil types, and, so you are being taxed as, a farm, and not potentially you could be a housing development. So you're never taxed on that potential amount.
Thank you.
Senator O'Brien.
Or I wonder, New York's such a big state and it's so very strong, but I wonder, are there discussions at times about sort of like, I don't know if you heard the earlier Massachusetts dairy farmer, but are there discussions of trying to keep dairy farms in certain places that may be struggling, like, the Hudson Valley or Long Island, as opposed to, say, upstate New York where Chobani or Fairlife plants are going in? Is there a commitment to keep dairy sort of all over the state, or is it really consolidating to those places in upstate New York where it's just dairy after dairy?
Oh, good question. I would say there's no specific program or like initiative of we need to keep, dairy farms in a specific area. I think it's based on, are you able to, make your farm work as it is? I did also want to flag, we also have the Dairy Modernization Grant Program, which is similar to folks were probably aware of, the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, but our dairy modernization, it's basically to, again, a grant to invest in your dairy farm so you can be more sustainable. So if you need to buy a bigger bulk tank to, maybe it's easier for your co-op to pick you up every other day and, be more sustainable because, you don't have to get picked up every day and it's easier for logistics. That's another thing to highlight as well. So you can have a bigger bulk tank, so you can have extended storage as well. So wanted to flag that in terms of that may make a dairy farm more sustainable as we see consolidation, you know, so flagging that as well.
When did all these programs begin? Are they recent? The last decade or last couple of years?
I know ITC has been around for a while, and we can get you the specific dates on each of the credits. You know, I know the farm employer overtime credit's the most recent one. Again, based on that overtime threshold that started in 2024. But yeah, we can get you specific dates. And then, you know, again, the big change to ITC in the last couple of years was to make it, you know, refundable for farmers.
Any questions?
This is Catherine. Excuse me. I wanted to go back to the comment about if there were specific geographic areas supporting the dairy industry. And I guess the one thing I wanted to just add on that is from a processor standpoint, some of the programs such as the Empire State Development Funds that are offered out there, while no geographic specificity to my understanding, they do look at areas of the state that have opportunities for job creation and things along those lines. So, you know, there's a bit of a lens of geography there, I suppose, not prescriptive, but at least, you know, a little bit more targeted in those investment dollars.
Okay. Great. Well, we appreciate your insight, your knowledge, and we're in the beginning stages of gathering information about various programs around the region. We appreciate your help with us trying to navigate all this.
I have some questions before they pop off.
Yeah.
Laura and Sarah, I have a question. So with the dairy farm modernization grant program, can people receive both a grant and a tax credit? And if so, have you seen more people accessing the tax credit with the grant program in place?
Good question, and we'll double check. So we just did the first round of dairy modernization. So that program is just getting started, but to my knowledge, there's no prohibition of like if you bought a bulk tank and got a grant for that, that you couldn't also claim a tax credit for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then, you know, just in terms of the tax credit side, the only sort of restriction is that farm workforce retention credit. Let me go back here. Really the only, you know, restriction for employees is if you claim this credit, you know, which is very valuable, it's $1,200 per employee. You can't use that employee in the computation of any other credit except for that farm employer overtime credit.
And who all administers these programs? Is it just through the tax department, or does the ag agency do any of this?
I mean, the tax department, I mean, we administer, you know, the credits as written, you know, in the law. And then of course, you know, we work closely with ag and markets on, you know, any policy and anything like that.
Any other questions from anyone? Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, Carol Hargan here. Just wanted to thank you for the presentation. It looks like all in a pretty robust program to support the dairy industry in general from many different avenues. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And, you know, as Lauren said, we can get you some additional information. And I've included our contact information at the end if you want to email us with any additional questions. You know, happy to provide more information, you know, as you go forward. So we're here to help. Happy to work with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate the support.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right, initial thoughts? We learned.
Thank you.
Well, certainly different than the Massachusetts program. Also has incentives there, so. What do you think?
Totally different program for Mass.
Yeah. Yeah. Be interesting to, for the budget implications, even in New York. So we'll follow up on there. Any questions online from anyone? Okay, I think we're in next step. So what do we've got some follow-ups, I think, from information we gathered today. Laura can do that. We're probably still in the information gathering world. Where else would you like to look?
Is there a way, Anson, when we get the information and synthesize it into some by state incentive, so we can start to quantify the size of the opportunity and or the tax itself relative to the industry and the size of the state?
If you could do that. I mean, it shouldn't be, I mean, the Massachusetts program, I don't think would be too difficult to calculate if you did, you know, if you did like $1 hundredweight, $1.50, did two, you could see what the, you know, how many pounds we produce, right?
Yeah.
So we can do that exercise. I don't think is too difficult. For the incentive program in New York, that's a little more challenging. But that one may not cost as much either, though, right? State perspective. Who knows? Maybe it's more, I don't know.
I think Connecticut is trying to mirror New York's tax credit. I think it's actually started first.
Say that again.
I think Connecticut started January 1st, the tax credit program.
Like
us.
an investment on
Investment tax credit.
like pass.
No, like New York.
Like you.
And then Connecticut is also looking at a $20 million appropriation for this year, one time, right?
Right, as subsidy.
Or who?
Connecticut.
Connecticut.
No, who would it go to?
Dairy farmers.
Dairy farmers. I think the governor announced it maybe 2 weeks ago.
There's the main.
And I don't know where it's, I don't know where it's in the legislative process, but they did a presentation. There were some comments online. I don't know if you want to share Peter Miller's.
I can share, let's see. So Pete Miller was on, he wrote comment in and let's see, actually, I'll just read it because it will be easier than trying to make this screen show you the chat. So he says, oh, there we go, except I can't scroll, that's the problem. He says, just from a Vermont dairy farmer's perspective, when I started my own semi-inherited dairy farm in 1998, Vermont was just below 2,000 farms. I believe we are less than 400 now. We went organic to try and take some control back, and yet organic is vulnerable also. That aside, we are just 4 miles from Massachusetts, so we interface with our neighbors frequently. One most important difference we observe between Vermont farms and Massachusetts farms that the next generation of farmers in Mass is optimistic about dairy farming and they are investing in their infrastructures. We do not have that kind of feeling here as a whole. The non-farming community is always supportive of us farmers here in the state. I don't believe the public would fuss at supporting the farmers by such programs. Super poor service where I'm at, so cannot speak, but I appreciate the focus on this. Please make sure something like this happens. And then Kevin wrote in, main producers over the last 4 months are seeing $4 a hundredweight. Typically, it's been $2.30 a hundred. We do have good contacts in Maine and Connecticut as well, if that would be of interest for the next meetings. Those are other regional partners.
I think that would probably be important to continue to gather information from neighboring states and maybe a nugget or two there, and maybe a nugget or two here. So, probably need as much information as we can.
I just remember from their last commission meeting, there was a lot of talk about just deferred maintenance investment. So in Vermont there. Right, but now we're seeing it. I know people, Richard Nelson says he buys a 200 horsepower tractor, and somebody in New York does it, and they get it. But then, they make some investment a lot different.
I think one of the key points is the younger generation being excited about staying up. The whole sustainability conversation that's, we're 10 years into it. Very seldom do you hear the economic part of that equation. Also has been rolled out farm practices. Very little on the economics of the farm to be sustainable. And having the youth interested in continuing on these farms. Very huge.
And to tag on to that, the economics of the farm, the economic impact on the community. I mean, this is economic policy. It is what it is, because ag policy, sound ag policy is economic policy. And you saw it in some of their numbers. I would say they're much larger, so you see what might be a small increase, it looks bigger, but attacking it from a lot of angles and programs were very interesting.
No, I was surprised to hear that New York State's school districts levy. I didn't realize that.
From the labor, if I saw it correctly, so they're gonna be paying more in labor costs. But they're gonna try to get some of that back through some tax credits. That was the trade-off of getting that. So the employees gonna get some money.
So the overtime.
Yes, overtime increase.
That's gonna keep ratcheting up or down.
How many farmers don't work 40 hours a week?
That's the debate. Some
Some of it, 24 hours a week.
I think it was aimed at the
Farm
workers.
workers
and
work
employees.
overtime,
Yeah.
but
It was
there's
a worker.
immigrant workers.
Aimed at the
Yes, they all
employee.
Who's gonna reap the benefit, the farm manager or the owner, or will the farm workers actually benefit from it too?
It's having talked to some dairies, not just in New York, but it's not as straightforward because most of the workers, especially the foreign workers here, are here to work, earn money and send it home. They don't want a 40-hour week. But some of the states that have really come down hard, like California, they had to redistribute their hours, maybe go from 3 times to 2 times a day milking in their herds. So their employees had less hours, so you might pay them more hours. So it's not as straightforward as you think. Everybody likes to take care of their employees. Connectivity around the Northeast on the employee side is very high. Very adapt to moving money available to them. Actually, they don't work in a vacuum.
Took this up in committee this year. I mean, federally.
Okay, so next steps, I think, look at Maine and Connecticut. Does that sound okay? There's some dates in mind or next meeting?
We can try to do June or early July.
Maybe just after the 4th.
After the 4th, great.
June's block.
I agree.
June.
It really does, doesn't it?
It's like the entire summer after
Last week.
Okay, so we will run some dates. I want to turn it, we got public comment. Anyone from the public would like to say something? All right. So we'll try to get together and get you a date for July. We'll talk about another neighboring states. In the meantime, we'll continue to gather more information from what we learned today. That's really valuable. So we'll start, as they say, looking at numbers, right? So I'm gonna come down to some numbers. Figure this all out. So, appreciate it. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
So this last bill. We're going to